Okay, now that we've finished our base coat and wet blending layers, we are going to start on the dry brushing layer. Now, the dry brushing layer is where we start to tone down some of the areas, smooth out some of the brush strokes, and we want to basically try and get all the blending looking really, really nice. So we just, by the end of this layer, the blends will look good, and then we'll just have the details left to go. So for this layer, we're going to be using these bristle brushes. We're going to be using these large brushes, and it's good that they're a bit coarse. We don't want to be using synthetic brushes for this, and I'll show you why in a minute. So basically the way this works is we get a little bit of paint on the brush, and like so, and then you brush it off on the newspaper. Okay, so you know how when you do a brush stroke and at the very end of the brush stroke, it gets kind of crusty and dry at the end? That's the effect we're going for, that last little bit. So it's like this. The technique is to hold your brush quite upright and to just rub it back and forwards like this. And it applies a really thin layer of whatever the colour is that you're wanting to use. You can brush it like this as well. And you can see that it's quite slow. It actually takes a while to come off. And so I'm just going to start working now over the foliage. And I'm looking at the image and I'm seeing that it has some areas of green and brown, and I'm just going to start kind of blending over the top of this, dry brushing over the top to create this layer. Now the thing about dry brushing is you don't want to do it too close to the edge because it does leave a fuzzy edge. Although if you use the end of the brush, you can get a sharp line, so like this. And it's quite soft and subtle, so get that edge and then you can start kind of blending lines over it. Now remember we talked about earlier about wanting the foliage to be sort of in the background. So I'm going to take quite a loose kind of effect with this. I'm not going to get really lovely sharp edges. I'm going to have the edges looking a little bit fuzzy, a little bit out of focus, and pretty toned down as well. So I don't want to be using any really high contrast colors. Really all you want for this layer is just to have the impression of the branch. You want to know that it's a branch, that it looks realistic, but it's not going to draw your attention, not going to take your eye off the bird. Because the paint is applied very lightly and in a very thin layer, we can use quite strong colours to actually do dry brushing. So you can see here I'm adding almost pure white, and it doesn't look white, it just creates a little kind of light highlight on the green. So you can use quite contrasting colours like black and white, or you can use colours that are really similar to the background just to tone it all down. And sometimes you need to go over the layers a few times just to get them looking right. Now this particular branch here has some yellow pieces. Put them in here like this. So I'm just going to give the impression of those yellows without actually making it too bright. The other way that you can do it is to add a colour, add a little bit of a colour on, so like a bit of black like this for example, a bit of a line going up the branch, then brush the rest of the paint off and just brush over it like that to sort of tone it down. And it just sort of makes it disappear into the image. So the other thing that dry brush is really good for is adding a colour tinge to an area of painting. So you can see here I'm just adding a little bit of brown into this branch, and it's really easy just to layer it down on top as a transparent layer. It shows the texture through, but it just changes the tone, the colour, sorry. And of course the other thing that's really good for is creating shadows. And so to do this, we just use a bit of pure black. Just put a little bit of black kind of along the base here. So there's a little shadow that runs underneath the foot, right along here. So I've just kind of applied the black, then I'm going to rub most of it off on my newspaper, and then you can brush it out. Just like that. Now there's also some little white highlights on here, so I can just pick up a little bit of that. And the other thing that's really good is that the branch has some vertical texture lines running down it, and we're going to pick those up a bit later on when we do some detail work. But with the white and with the black, we can actually add some of those textures in, some of those lines in, just by making sure that we work in the direction that we want to work in. So the lines of the dry brush actually move in the direction of the texture. With the dry brush layer, all we're wanting to do is just get the tone right, get the blending right, and then we can add the textures and the details in over the top.